Good afternoon, everyone. Okay, my presentation, basically, I'm going to unpack how the Joint Project Preparation Facility came about and our collaboration with the Export Development Fund. I'm going to talk about its rationale and what we're trying to achieve and the key takeaways of our particular intervention. So first and foremost, I'm going to start off with some statistics. As we're all aware, in 2015, the African Development Bank identified that Africa has an infrastructure gap of about $130 to $170 billion per annum. Now, this was even before COVID and the implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement. Now, in light of the implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement and the COVID pandemic, what we've seen is that the infrastructure gap has increased significantly. Secondly, what we also noticed with regard to the report that we've seen from UNCTAD is that having an infrastructure gap is one thing, but over and above that, you also need investments that will ride on that infrastructure so that we can facilitate trade. And the UNCTAD report highlights that we need about $485 billion per annum in order to ensure that we can sweat out these investments and unlock development impact for our member countries. What we also noted is that from the World Bank report that was prepared in 2021 is that for Malawi in particular to crowd in investments in the infrastructure sector with a focus on energy and water, you did about $7.6 billion over the next 15 to 20 years. That's about $300 to $400 million. When you do some analysis, what you realize is that having this infrastructure is good, but you also need investments. So what that means is that Malawi needs about $20 billion over and above the energy gap, the water gap, which does not even mention transport and logistics. So what you quickly realize is that the government, as has been stated by the Minister of Finance, does not have sufficient capacity. Why? Because they're competing interests. The government has to bridge some of the gaps that it faces. And when you look at this particular slide, I would like to point out two particular factors. Now, this is a slide that we've seen many times from McKinsey International, and it shows the project development value chain. So typically, when a project developer is coming up with an idea or a concept, they assess the environment within which they operate. So they look at Malawi and say, what are the legal and regulatory frameworks within which they operate? They'll then define the project to understand what particular sectors and what opportunities are present. Then they'll then undertake a feasibility study, structure the project, and then bring it to a financial institution such as AFREXIMBANK or EDF for financing. So what you quickly realize is that most financial institutions sit on the back end of that particular intervention. So what they do is that they actually wait for a developer or sponsor with the technical and financial wherewithal to bring a project through all these 4 stages. What we see from the statistics is that only 1 in 10 projects on average make it to be financed by a potential financial institution. Now, this also brings me back to the Africa infrastructure paradox, because when you read the World Investment Report, what you realize is that globally, there's about $100 trillion of investment funding sitting with pension funds, institutional investors, and sovereign wealth funds. These are funds that are available for any well-structured or packaged project that can be tapped into. A typical example is what we saw in 2020 with the Mozambique LNG project. This was the biggest project that Africa has ever done, $24 billion. And in that particular project, because it was well-structured and packaged, this project was able to attract international funding. What that tells us is that developing projects that are bankable, that risks are well identified and mitigated, definitely can crowd in investments. But this project, what no one tells is that this project took about 10 to 12 years to be developed. 10 to 12 years to develop a $24 billion project. Not many of us have the patience to go through that kind of heavy lifting. So what we at AFREXIMBANK did was, we looked at this particular slide and we said, what can we as a developer institution do to unpack and fast track the continent's economic development? And we realized that the key challenge is right here at the feasibility stage, at this 20% drop. So what we did is we opened it up and we saw what the key challenges were. So 3 key things happen at the feasibility stage. So first and foremost, your typical developer or sponsor at times does not have the capacity to assess projects. They do not know where to identify consultants that can prepare solid, robust, bankable business plans. Or even if they do not have the financial resources to finance those studies. For example, a complex project finance transaction in the hydropower sector, a typical environmental social impact assessment report can range from anything from $300,000 to $400,000 to even $1.5 million. So those costs can be quite prohibitive. The other thing that we noticed was that even when we come across developers and sponsors who know where to get the technical expertise, they know where, and they have the funding, at times they do not have the ability to engage with government. As we all know, you have to work within the laws of the country within which you operate. So we at AFREXIMBANK identified that given the fact that Malawi and other member countries are our shareholders, we have a very good relationship within which we can step in, handhold our clients, and take them to the various ministries so that we can ensure that the right policies, the right regulatory frameworks are put in place so that we can get to bankability. So we saw an opportunity that instead of AFREXIMBANK sitting at the transaction support stage, whereby you're waiting with everyone else, arms folded, for a transaction to come through the value chain, and only one intent will come through, why not take the risk? Why don't you understand what this cycle is about? Move upstream, handhold them, and bring more projects to bankability. What we see when we do that is this particular slide, which is very enlightening, and this is the primary thrust of project preparation and why we established a project preparation facility in AFREXIMBANK. What we saw was that when you intervene in the project preparation phase during the feasibility stage, and you provide funding, you provide access to technical consultants, and you facilitate engagements with the government and the public sector, the likelihood of projects getting to bankability increases so much more. What we saw was that from a ratio of 1 in 10 projects getting to bankability, that ratio increases to at least, from out of 10 projects to 4 to 5 projects. So for example, if there were 100 ideas in Malawi, in a typical year, you'll have had 10 projects. With a project preparation facility, out of 100 projects, you'll have at least 40 to 50 projects being brought. Remember what I said about the infrastructure paradox. We've got investors who are waiting to support these projects. So all we have to do is bridge that gap, package these transactions, and unlock this development impact. So what exactly is a project preparation facility? A project preparation facility is basically a tool. It's a trade enabler. Essentially, it's a product that comes in, works with developers and sponsors to de-risk a project. How does it do that? First and foremost, you look at various components of a particular project. You look at the sponsor's capacity. Do they have the capacity to implement that project? Do they have the technical skills to assess the project? The market, the operations, the environmental impact assessment, the legal and regulatory frameworks. So you look at the project from those 6 key areas, and then identify solutions to each particular facet. Now, these are skills that normally most developers and sponsors, unfortunately on the continent, do not have the capacity to do that. AFREXIMBANK is in a position to step in and bridge some of these gaps. So the fund was essentially established to provide technical services and financial services, and of course, trade facilitation support, as I mentioned. The joint project preparation facility that we established with EDF, this collaboration commenced in 2020, and essentially, it was born out of the fact that AFREXIMBANK on its own cannot bridge the project preparation gaps. We estimate the project preparation gaps at between 5 to 10% of our total project investment cost. Assuming the infrastructure gap of $130 billion, that's about $6.5 billion per annum. Definitely, AFREXIMBANK does not have the capacity to bridge those gaps. So what we did is we came up with an innovative idea, which is a joint project preparation facility, a first-of-a-kind intervention, whereby AFREXIMBANK is partnering in-country with various financial institutions to establish project preparation facilities. And we're rolling this out across all member countries. And we started off with EDF. And what we're doing in this particular instance is that AFREXIMBANK and EDF have pooled resources under our first pilot phase. And I'm sure you've all heard today about the 2 industrial parks in Malawi. And those are our pilot projects. We've pooled resources and we're developing those projects together. Now, under this particular intervention, what you can see is we intend to scale this intervention up so that we can support more institutions or SPVs. So this can be scaled up once we've demonstrated proof of concept, which we've done through the industrial parks. In terms of sectors of intervention, in this particular area with EDF, we're looking at logistical platforms, that is industrial parks. We're looking at agro-processing, light manufacturing, services, and extractives. Again, building on what Dr. Jordan said, we're leveraging off Malawi's comparative advantages, because that is what will make them be competitive. The services that are provided under this joint project preparation facility are 4. So first and foremost, we finance the preparation of bankable and feasibility studies. These are your environmental impact assessment reports, financial models, market studies, information memorandums, the full suite of documentation that you typically will require to be put in place before you can submit them to a financial institution, such as EDF or AFREXIMBANK. The second thing that we do is we support the procurement of transaction advisors. This could be legal, technical, or financial in nature. We also support the procurement of project managers because we are cognizant of the fact, and in our experience in the continent, is that we do come across developers and sponsors who are keen to diversify their portfolios and invest into particular sectors which is not their niche. However, they don't have the expertise, so we're able to engage project managers who can step in on their behalf and oversee the development of some of these projects. We also support last-mile activities in form of fundraising and marketing expenses. It's one thing to have a detailed financial model and an information memorandum and a data room to present to a bank. But when you approach financial institutions for senior debt funding, there are certain costs associated with that exercise. There are facility fees, there are appraisal fees, there are lenders' technical advisory fees that need to be paid. AFREXIMBANK, again, is happy to support that. What that does is it ensures that we can close out that financing gap, provide these technical advisory services so that more projects, again, can get to bankability. And that's what we're doing with EDF. So who are the typical JPPF partners that we target across the continent? So first and foremost, we can partner with government, PPPs, or the private sector. All we're looking for or targeting is investors who are searching for impact, development impact. So there is that alignment. We support projects that are greenfield and brownfield in nature. So anyone coming up with a new idea or concept that's unique, we're more than happy to have a look at those projects. If there's an existing project that needs to be scaled up, again, it's an opportunity for us to engage. Eligibility sectors are primarily broken down into 2 broad windows. We've got what we call the trade enabling infrastructure window, and typically the transactions that we support here are under energy. This could be renewable or thermal power energy sources. Transport and logistics. This is road, rail, air, and maritime transport, and ICT. With regards to manufacturing and service exports, again, what we do here is we are focusing on value addition and an export development angle. So what's unique to us is that we support their logistical platforms, healthcare, agro-processing, hospitality and tourism, or even the creative economy. The cross-cutting themes of our particular intervention are primarily geared first and foremost to promoting intra-African trade, which sits very well without the bank's mandate, as we were established to support intra-African trade and support the implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement. We support connectivity, especially given the fact that Malawi is land-linked, so we are keen to support transactions that are in that particular sector. And competitiveness. It's not lost on us that all goods and services that are produced in Malawi have to be competitive from a cost perspective for them to be assimilated into global and regional value chains. Last but not least, we've embedded resilience. And again, this was brought to the fore during the COVID-19 pandemic, when the supply chain disruptions affected the continent as a whole. And this is primarily geared on 2 aspects. First and foremost, we are onshoring industries and companies onto the continent, whereby if you are dependent on Chinese companies or European companies, we are now supporting local developers to establish those companies in country so as to minimize that risk. The second thing that we're also doing is building up storage capacities in forms of warehouses so that we can stock up capacity in the unlikely event of any supply chain disruption. What's our value proposition? 4 key areas. First and foremost, AFREXIMBANK has been in existence for the last 30 years. In the last 30 years, we've been working across the whole continent. What that means is that, first and foremost, we've got a lot of experience. We've got a lot of knowledge of working with various member countries in various sectors. That means we've got a lot of body of knowledge against which we can draw on from experiences to come up with solutions. The second thing that I also like to highlight is the fact that, having been in the operations for the last 30 years, we have a list of over 500 best-in-class consultants. These are in the financial services, it's your big 4. On the technical side, it's Mott MacDonald, Arup, Royal Haskonig, etc. On the legal side, it's the London firms that we typically use. What this means is that we can draw and call upon the best consultants globally to structure and package our transactions. What this means is that when we take these transactions to financial institutions, be it AFREXIMBANK or even other third-party financial institutions, there's credibility that's brought into those transactions, and they are robustly and well packaged, leveraging off the experience. What we also try to do with the project preparation facility, in as much as we use international consultants, we try as much as possible to support local content. So if there are local lawyers that we can bring on board so that they can also be upskilled, with the objective that in the medium term, we can have local consultants becoming part of our panel. So this is something that we're also doing in order to ensure that we can uplift our consultants. The other thing that we've also done, and the other value proposition, is with regards to the solutions that we offer. AFREXIMBANK has a wide suite of products, like Ranti mentioned this morning. So we can call upon financial advisory services when you're structuring a transaction. We can call upon debt facilities. We can call upon syndication facilities and risk-bearing instruments. What that means is that when we are structuring the project during the development phase, we can call on this expertise skills so that we can structure the project and ensure that all risks are mitigated. That is a benefit to all people who engage with us. Last but not least, we've put in place a capacity building program, because we are cognizant of the fact that project preparation is a relatively new field on the continent. So we've entered into partnerships whereby once we enter into a JPPF partnership, we can bring on board an expert institution. In this particular instance, we're partnering with UNIDO. And UNIDO, we've deliberately chosen UNIDO because it's agnostic and neutral, and they have been doing project preparation for the last 20 to 30 years. They actually prepared AFREXIMBANK's feasibility study when AFREXIMBANK was being established. So we partner with them, and we ensure that they come up with capacity building programs so that institutions such as EDF can also upskill their resources. And the objective is that in the next 3 to 4 years, EDF should have a fully fledged project preparation facility that can operate on its own. What are the benefits of this JPPF approach to the government of Malawi? 3 key highlights. So first and foremost, it's a catalytical tool that can be used to fast-track the attainment of Malawi's 2063 vision. And this is deliberately as to why we have prioritized the industrial parks, because it's one of the key strategic initiatives that the government is keen to support. Not to mention the involvement of the private sector that will come on board so that we can support and crowding investments and freeing up government funding. The other key thing that we see is that with project preparation, since we are targeting the private sector, we are leaving the government to just put in place an enabling environment. We come in, roll our sleeves, get our hands dirty in structuring and packaging these transactions, and bring in the private sector. So government can focus on its core objectives and deliverables, and also ensure that it's not too constrained with its fiscal gaps. Lastly, one of the benefits of this particular intervention is the development impacts that can be unlocked. Besides steady GDP growth, we can see forex revenues being generated, creation of quality jobs, and also technology transfer. Our experience in project preparation, and this is just but a sample of the projects that we've actually approved and are developing as we speak. 2 things I would like to highlight. These are 8 projects. We've committed $12 million. These projects should be coming on stream in the next 2 to 3 years. The total investment value is $3.5 billion. This shows you the potency of project preparation. You're committing $1 early stage to develop these projects, but what you're bringing in and crowding in is a significant multiple. It's one of the most impactful developments, one of the most impactful instruments in the development finance world. The other key thing I wanted to highlight with regards to this particular project is that when they come on stream, they'll generate at least 150,000 jobs across the continent. One particular project I would like to highlight, because this is also similar to what Malawi is doing and what we're doing with the EDF, is the project in South Africa. Now, as we all know, South Africa has the 2nd largest titanium reserves globally. Before our engagement with this particular client, what used to happen was that South Africa would mine the titanium and export it to Australia and Asia with minimal value addition. With the onset of the project preparation facility, what has now happened is that we are now setting up the first fully integrated titanium plant on the continent. So we'll be taking titanium ore, processing it, adding value, and coming up with a titanium pigment, paint. The value addition factor is 1 in 10. just by putting up this plant. It's a $550 million investment. But the Forex revenues that it will generate for South Africa, the Forex diversification, the Forex savings for the continent, because initially the whole continent imports paint. There's no production of paint in Africa. So these are some of the impactful developments we see with project preparation. Before I conclude, just 3 key takeaways from my presentation. $1 invested in project preparation crowds in at least $10 to $30 in private sector investment, if not more. And if you're very smart about it, you can even make it 100, depending on how you position yourself and how early you come on stream. The second thing is that when we do our project preparation, we pursue a value chain approach, similar to what Dr. Jordan has explained to us. So we look at transactions from end to end, from inputs to the ultimate market. More often than not, when most people present projects to banks, they look at one particular angle. But when you look at it as an integrated approach, you quickly realize where the gaps are and what the challenges are. And that way you can actually structure it to ensure that you get a fully holistic technical and financial solution. Lastly, mine is just to say that AFREXIMBANK and EDF, we're open for business. We're looking to partner with yourselves, both in the private and the public sector, so that we can support Malawi actualize its Vision 2063. Thank you.